So thank you very, very much, Brittany, for the invitation. Happy to do this and happy to have this shared as widely as possible. I'm a public educator. I have a long-term involvement with public education in Rhode Island and New Hampshire. I've been a beekeeper for 14 years. I'm an anthropologist, so I love all of this, and I love the study of nature and humans interaction. And of course, bees and humans have been interacting for quite a long time. So I asked the question, many people can't tell the difference between a bumblebee and a honeybee. And one reason is they hang out on the same flowers, but I have gardens in both Rhode Island and New Hampshire, and I actually see more bumblebees on my flowers than I see honeybees, but I know the honeybees are very active. And so, of course, our big, fat, furry friend is the bumblebee, and the honeybee is very distinctive with the bands of the black bottom, so to speak, and the bands. And we'll be talking more about honeybees as we move along. All right, now I want to move to the next slide. So that is not responding, Brittany. I'm hitting next slide and it's not moving. There we go. Okay. So I've been at this for quite a while, and I have to pay my respects to my dear sister-in-law, Jean Lobben Thompson, who gave me my first book on beekeeping and strongly encouraged me. She was a New Hampton resident and president of New Hampshire Garden Club at the time, and she and her husband were memorialized in their flower garden in New Hampton. And my husband, of course, has been a fellow beekeeper and a strong enthusiast for all of these years along with me. Okay, next slide. There we go. So we have this amazing world of bees, which are, particularly the honeybees are Apis mellifera, which were native to the African continent, and then only came to the New World, came to America, the Americas, with European colonization. And so the basic, what should we say, biology of bees is, of course, the queen, who is all important, the workers, who represent about 90% of the hive, and then drones, which are the males, and they are kind of, they're lazy lie-arounds, but they have one function, which is to impregnate the queen, or the new queen, when new queens are being produced. That's their one big job. So here we see the queen is the largest insect, the largest bee in the colony. The drones are sort of, squat and fat, and then the workers are as I said, the majority of the hive. Typically, queens are marked, as you see here, with this green dot, which makes it easier for us to identify them when we examine them in the hives. Apis did evolve in colder zones, and because of that, stored honey and actually cluster in the wintertime. So the honey storage has to do with survival through colder climates. Okay, having trouble moving down. There we go. So very important to know that honeybees are different from wasps and hornets. And you get stung by one, you really want to know the difference. But they're not the only insect pollinators. Bumblebees are also pollinators, as are other creatures we can talk about. This is, of course, a wasp nest, if you've ever had one. A lot of people say, oh, I've got bees, and they call a beekeeper and say, oh, come remove it. And we say, wait a minute, that's a wasp nest or a hornet's nest. We're not going to do that. But this is a typical frame of bees. We'll be looking at inside the hive more so. There's another person who has added. Hello, greetings to the other person who has just arrived, and welcome. So this is what a frame of inside the hive looks like, and we'll be looking at that in more detail as we go along. But what we see here, not only are the honeybees, but we also see some comb here, which is drone comb. So we want to remove that. We want to get rid of that. And this is all cap brood, meaning these are babies who are about to be born. And there we see our bees on pollen. What they do is they store pollen and nectar in the cells in the hive. So my computer is very slow to move to the next slide. There we go. So the queen, as we've mentioned, there she is. You can find her in the hive because she is always adored, shall we say, or attended to by her attendants, which form this kind of star pattern around her. And since she is the most critical bee in the hive, when you remove her, there are some tricks that are performed at state fairs, like this case in the Ohio State Fair. You take the queen out of the hive and you put her, because she's pretty docile, on a human being, and the bees all follow to that queen. And so you have these kind of tricks that are used at state fairs and so forth, where you know, it looks like, oh, isn't he getting stung? Actually not. The bees are pretty docile unless they're having to be defensive. They're not aggressive, they're defensive. All right, there we go. So I am an anthropologist, so it is my obligation to tell you that humans have been gathering honey for a very long time, at least, you know, from the time, certainly before the time of agriculture, at least back as far as 15, 20,000 years ago. We have some of these early petroglyphs which show honey hunting or honey collection, and we know that they went to great lengths and great difficulties to actually collect honey. It's estimated, at least by Australian anthropologists, entomologists, that honey hunting goes back as far as 50,000 years BC in Australia. Great source of glucose, great source of food, actually. Okay, humans, including this human who you see before you, learned that smoking calms bees. And so when you want to examine bees, when you want to open up the hive and see what's going on, as we're doing now to make sure everything is humming along, so to speak, all right. So smoking calms the bees. It causes them to withdraw into the hive and not to be, you know, aggressive or defensive in any way. So that smoking, as these folks are doing in actually where bees are in trees in many parts of Africa, is used to calm the bees so that the honey can be just taken. And that is something which is a great tasty treat. So many of my friends have said, well, they get stung because we've spent time in the continent of Africa. You certainly get stung, but it's well worth it. It's well worth the price that you pay. Okay, still trying to advance the next slide. Slow to respond here. There we go. Okay, so actual beekeeping, which I would say is managing bees. Bees will never be domesticated. They are free to go from the beginning of time until now. So we try to keep them in the hives by feeding them and managing them and giving them a nice warm place to stay. But it wasn't until the time of the rise of agriculture that people began to manage bees and keep them in storage places, or keep them in fact, the first ones were actually cylindrical hives, which date in Mesopotamia, the land between the two rivers, and Egypt from at least 3000 BC. So we have archaeological evidence, which is here on the left, of the ancient cylindrical hive, not like our square hives and our rectangular hives that you're going to see shortly, that were embedded in walls. And actually, my husband and I were anthropologists. We spent years living in Egypt, living in the Nile Valley. And these are actually contemporary beehives, same cylindrical hives, which are in use in Egypt today. So rather than the boxes you're going to see that are common in the West, these cylindrical hives were the original hives. And they were embedded in walls. And some reports had it that actually they were embedded in homes so that you could actually extract the comb and the honey directly from the side of a wall in some of the earlier homes in the Middle East. All right, next slide. Moving slowly here. We have a very slow connection. At least it's not storming. We had a Zoom call earlier that was a storm going and we just lost connection. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this is our father, quote unquote, the father of modern beekeeping, who turns out to be a priest, the Reverend Lorenzo Langstroth, who invented the modern hive, which is the hive that you've probably come to see. And you can see them around in our towns because they're local beekeepers, and you'll see these boxes and you'll say, I wonder what that is. Those are beehives. And so the value of this was that they are basically hives that can be opened, inspected, and managed. But that was only from 1850. So the modern hive is only 100, 150, 200 years old. So the Langstroth hive, named for Reverend Lorenzo Langstroth of Philadelphia, it allows this inspection. So you can open the hive, and these are pictures of our own hives, where you can open the hive, pull out the frame, examine the frame, make sure that there's a laying queen, that the queen, there's a good pattern of fresh eggs, developing brood, capped brood that's ready to emerge as new bees. It allows you to assess the health of the hive and the well-being of the hive. And it's something I was just doing earlier today, and you do throughout the summer, because the summer is a very, very active time, as you could well imagine. So that's the value of the Langstroth hive. It allows you to manage colony health, to make sure that the hive is in good condition, and that it will, most importantly, not only make it through the summer and the fall, but make it through the winter. So I'm an anthropologist. It's my obligation to tell you that many, many cultures revere the honeybee for probably obvious reasons. And the great Egyptian civilization, which lasted for thousands of years, actually used the bee, the honeybee, as a royal symbol. And it was actually a symbol in hieroglyphics as well. It even was used on one of the coins of one of the Ptolemaic kings in the latter part of the Egyptian civilization. Here we see how honey was stored in those cylinders or cylindrical containers. This is obviously a beekeeper who is, you could say, adoring, but actually just acknowledging this store of honey and the gratitude to the honeybee. And of course, you see this here also in this bas relief. So the term was nasubiti, and it sounds almost like the little bee. In fact, the word today in Arabic, I speak Arabic, is bitti, bitti. I'm hitting the buttons, there we go. So our European ancestors kept bees in trees. And so maybe you've heard about the skep, and actually the skep is the most important symbol of bees and beekeeping. It's not any longer in use. In fact, it is not even legal to use, because it cannot be inspected like the Langstroth hives. But the straw skep was the way that bees were kept by Europeans. They also kept them in trees and hollows in trees, and basically would take on a seasonal basis, take the honey and take the comb, but never take all of the colony, leave enough, leave the queen and leave the bee, so that they could return the following year or the following season to collect this honey. And so the skep is the symbol of the beehive. Kind of interesting, because that has carried over into our day and age. And so when people think of the beehive, they think of this shape. So much so that the state of Utah, which is a state which has a very strong, of course, Mormon tradition, but a very strong collectivist idea, itself uses the beehive as a symbol of its collectivity, of the strength of the Mormon faith, the strength of the Mormon people, the strength of the state. It is incorporated into many of the outward manifestations of the state itself, the state of Utah. One of the things that interests me and interests anyone who's interested in the history of our world, the history of life in the world, and the antiquity of that, is that bees and flowers evolved together, and they really go back a long time, at least 60 million years. So bees have been around a long time. I always assure people that we're worried about the bees, but they have been surviving a lot over 60 million years. And the most interesting thing is that they co-evolved with flowers. So the bees and flowers had this mutual relationship where the flowering plants that first appeared were something that the insects were attracted to extract from them pollen and nectar, but also this was a great source of pollination. And so the bumblebees were the first to evolve, but honey-storing bees, which is our honeybees, the Apis mellifera, evolved from those honeybees. So bees, bumblebees, and honeybees are not the only pollinators. There are others. I mean, flies, beetles, moths, butterflies, wasps, ants, birds, bats, all are pollinators. So even if we lose some of these species, there are other pollinators, but only honeybees are those that produce and store honey. And so they are unique in that respect. Trying to get to the next slide. There we go. Honeybees, interesting, they do not hibernate. Many people ask me, because when they come and see the hives, they say, oh, what do they do in the wintertime? Do they hibernate? They don't hibernate like bears or like other animals, but they do cluster. And they cluster in the winter around the queen to make sure that the queen is kept alive. And so they kind of keep going around in a circle around the queen, you know, using their wings to add warmth to the hives, even in the coldest places, so that bees can be kept everywhere, not only from, you know, New Hampshire and New England, but bees are kept in Alaska as well. When you open the hive in the spring and you see that there's a strong cluster, that this has, the bees have survived the winter, it is just a joy which is unimaginable and hard to express. You feel very happy that they have made it through the winter. So winter is a long, tough period. Now in late spring and early summer, swarms are very common, and that actually is a sign of a strong hive, of a healthy hive. So if your hive swarms, I've been a beekeeping mentor for many years, and I've had a lot of people who I've helped along the way, and actually beekeeping is one of those hobbies, shall we say, or pastimes, where mentoring is really important, or apprenticeship, shall we say. You really need to learn from other beekeepers. You can't just open Beekeeping for Dummies and think that you can, you know, you can figure it out. And so one of the things that is common if you've had a healthy hive through the winter is that in late spring and early summer, swarms are very common. If the hive is expanding and multiplying so much that there's a certain amount of congestion that you try to control, but you can't always control it, and the hive swarms, which is actually its form of natural reproduction. And so by swarming, a third to a half of the hive leaves, usually with the old queen, and a new queen is being produced to replace the dying queen or the old queen. And so what you're going to see, I don't know if it's clear on this screen, but these are swarms. Whenever you see a swarm like this, it's like a big, you know, blob of bees hanging from a tree. It used to be that people would, you know, bring out a can of Raid and try to eliminate them. And I think we've done a successful job of educating the public that these swarms are gentle, they're not aggressive, and they're really there on a temporary basis. They're looking for a new home. They're looking for a new place to live. And they may be taken out of a home where they took up for a winter if there was an attic that was not occupied. But the main message for the public is do not destroy a swarm when you see it. Don't be worried about it. Call a beekeeper, call the Penny Baker or other beekeeper association, and they will be happy to take the swarm, because guess what? It's a new little colony of bees. If you're lucky, you can capture them and put them in a hive them and have a new hive. Next slide is coming. There we go. So you're probably gardeners if you've tuned into this talk, or you love flowers, or you like what we appreciate here in our spring and summertime. So this is the time when bees are busiest, and they're very commonly seen on some of our most familiar flowers. And as a matter of fact, they like the native wildflowers as much, if not more, than the cultivated ones. So they are very happy to be on dandelions, to be on azaleas earlier. Coneflowers are coming in now, so they love those. In the earlier spring, the crocuses, and this is actually out west, one of the flowers out west. But so you'll see them, and you'll see them basically harvesting the pollen and the nectar from the flowers. And it's a great time to do some honeybee observation. So in July, which is the time where we are now, we're beginning to see the dearth, not quite yet, but as you probably know, if you're gardeners, if you watch the garden, the spring efflorescence is past now, and we're looking forward to the fall goldenrod and to the, some of the fall asters. But right now, we're beginning to come into a period of dearth of flowers. And so during this period, you will find the bees not, being less active, and particularly on hot days. I've been seeing this in my hives in Rhode Island. I haven't seen it here yet. They beard on very hot days. What they're trying to do is they're trying to keep the hive at a constant temperature, and they come out and they're fanning the hive to keep a constant, 85 to 90 degrees temperature in the hive. This image on the left side of the screen, I just was so enchanted with, because sometimes beekeepers make mistakes. I've done it. You forget to, look when you should have, or put in extra frames, and you leave open spaces. Bees do not like open spaces. They want to fill the spaces. They want to make sure that their hive is nice and tight. So this, as a beekeeper, forgot to put a frame in for the honeycomb when reassembling his hive. So the beekeepers built a comb to maximize the airflow. This is just such a beautiful design, and it's such a beautiful piece of architecture. It just gives you this tremendous appreciation of what bees are capable of, and the knowledge that they possess. There's a whole other talk I give about bee navigation and how they find flowers using the sun for directionals, and their navigational skills are absolutely superb. 60 million years working on it. Next slide. Sorry for this slow response, but here we go. As we approach the late summer, and those of you, anybody raising corn, you might see some honeybees on corn. I was surprised the first time I saw honeybees on corn tassels, because I thought, what are they interested in there? But it's apparently very sweet. And I don't know how good your eyes are here, but this honeybee's got a big pollen sac. So she has actually been collecting a lot of pollen, as well as enjoying the sweetness of the corn tassel. And probably too small for you to see, but they're on these wild asters as well. So as we move into the late summer, honeybees are still working the flowers, working the products that we use to produce our much beloved New Hampshire corn. All right. Well, I could not make this talk in New Hampshire without talking about the Shaker community, which if you haven't been to the Shaker community, it's worth a visit. They're very interesting as part of New Hampshire history. But what I was surprised to find in taking some international guests to this community was that they had a very strong beekeeping part of their life. So they also adopted, as we saw, the skep, the beehive, as a symbol for the community. And of course, this is a religious community, a community of very strong collective coming together for religious purposes, but also for social industry and communal life. And the skep, once again, is their symbol. So those of you who have visited, or you know anything about the Shakers, you know their life simplicity was emphasized in life as well as in design. And so these Shaker baskets, of course, are well known, and their style of architecture also very simple. Famous for their religious performance and relative equality of women, and of course they were called the Shakers because of the physical representation of their religious beliefs. And of course there were a large number of women who had relatively high positions. but they were also enthusiastic beekeepers. And so Henry Blinn was the most, what should we say, influential or best known. There is a mistake on the, it's 1824 to 1905, not 25. That would make him close to 100 years old when he died. So mistake in my, that I only noticed as I was going over this for the last time earlier today. But anyway, Henry Blinn was the famous teacher, preacher, and beekeeper. And so he was an inspirational figure and sort of a motivator behind the industry of beekeeping and the products that come from the hive for the Shaker community. And so here he is along with the hives. Here they're using the Langstroth hive, although Blinn and others invented a unique type of hive, which you only find in the Shaker community. I think I have a picture of that. Yeah, this is the hive. It's ingenious, and basically the comb and the honey was taken from the bottom here, and you know, the bees were kept in the top. It's just unlike anything. You know, it is just unique. It's the best way to speak about it. But it apparently was quite productive, and only used in Shakers. So when you see this design, you say, oh yeah, that's a Shaker hive. And a unique style of veil as well. So, you know, they were innovative people, are innovative people. And their honey, I just think, has the best name I've ever heard for honey. I bottle and sell my honey and our honey, the bees' honey. It is one of the sweetest things that you can have, and I can talk about how honey can be used, the many uses of honey and the many ways that you can cook with it. But they called their honey soul of flowers, which I just think is a beautiful idea. The soul of the flowers is expressed in their honey. So this was soul of flowers honey. Hey, we got to the next slide easily. So there are other things that you can do with beeswax. My husband makes candles, so these are all beeswax candles that you know, burn longer, have a lovely fragrance, and are natural, which is beautiful. And also, I'm of Ukrainian ancestry myself, and so I grew up with my mother teaching me how to do some of these simple designs, the Ukrainian eggs, or the pisanki, if you know anything about them. Basically, it's a batik style of dyeing, if you understand that what you do is you apply beeswax to every place on the egg, an egg which has been emptied of its contents, by the way. You don't want to have an egg that has not been, that suddenly falls and makes a horrible stink. You apply beeswax to wherever you want color to be retained. And so this is the initial phase of applying beeswax to an egg with one of the most ancient designs. It's called the sunburst design. And you know, all of these eggs which you see here are eggs which I've done or created using either ancient designs or some of the new designs. Many of them involve nature, in this case deer. It's one of my favorite eggs, which shows the 4 seasons, you know, that change with what the deer are eating and what the deer are harvesting from the trees. It's quite lovely. So that's also something which comes from beekeeping and beeswax, which lets me know that Ukrainians were ancient beekeepers. One of the things that has been a very welcome part of the contemporary era is that beekeeping, which used to be associated with, of course, rural life, and in fact, in colonial days, it was said that every family had a beehive, and that was, of course, the only source of sweetener they had before sugar came into the colonies and became something that we became addicted to. So beekeeping was something that was associated with rural life. The idea that you could keep bees in an urban area in cities was just novel and not something that was associated with beekeeping at all. But to leave it to the New York beekeepers who started reviving beekeeping and bringing it to the cities, particularly rooftop beekeeping along the what is that called, where the L used to go, which is now grasslands. The top of hotels, the whole Waldorf Astoria has beehives. So they have brought beekeeping to be something which is welcome a welcome part of the urban environment. And of course, they have that wonderful Central Park area where, you know, bees flourish, as well as other forms of wildlife and birds and so forth. So urban beekeeping now in some states, you know, is the majority. There are more beekeepers in the cities than there are in the rural areas. So that's been a real change in our culture. Come on, there we go. Yes, as I said, New York beekeepers led the way. Urban rooftop from Brooklyn to the Waldorf Astoria. Of course, they sell their honey for a very good price, probably twice what we charge for our honey. But anyway, it's New York and everything is more expensive. But here are some of these rooftop hives, and you can see that bees can survive and thrive in cities. And why is that? Of course, there's a certain lack of trees, but there are enough trees for them. There are enough flowers. They are very creative foragers. And so these hives are telling me, with these tall hives, that the bees are not only doing well, but they're producing a lot of honey. So that's a new part of our culture. Of course, there are many products that come out of the hive besides honey. Pollen. Many people swear by consuming pollen as a health food. Royal jelly is something which is a very much valued, particularly in China, as a kind of you know, something which will not only improve your health but your sex life. If you've ever had a glass of mead or honey wine, it's delightful. And in fact, we have made mead for both of our daughters' weddings from our own honey, which was a delight to many people. It's kind of an acquired taste, but a well-made mead that is aged properly, at least 6 months to a year, and the more years it gets better with age, like all the other wines. It's a lovely drink. And of course the candles, and candles coming in all kinds of shapes. So how do we extract the honey? We take the frames out of the hive that have capped honey, and this is capped honey right here. We basically scrape that, and then we spin it in a spinner. And so the spinning is what releases the honey, and then what we do is we just strain it. So raw honey is honey which is just simply strained. There we go. So this is, you know, honey that's being uncapped here. And this is our own processing. So yeah, it's strained through a gross and a fine strainer. And so that your final product is just simply a pure honey product that doesn't have bee parts or, you know, wax in it. That's what raw honey is. Interestingly, most American beekeepers are not people who are raising bees for honey. They're mainly raising bees for crop pollination. And so the bees, many of the commercial beekeepers take their bees from one part of the country to another. In fact, they often start in California and they start moving the bees east from California. They start in California on the almonds, and then they move the bees east. They go to Florida for the citrus crop and then come up the East Coast using the bees mainly for pollination. It's one of the things that's weakening the overall bee population, that they're only exposed to a single crop and they're just exposed to all these pesticides as well. It's one of our big problems. There are many medicinal uses for honey. Some people use them for burns, and apparently honey is very effective for burns, for surgical wound therapy, radiation therapy. Some of our more progressive doctors, medical doctors, are using honey in this way. And of course, some people see that the local honey helps with the seasonal allergies as well. And so I think we need more studies on this, but many people swear by that. If you have spring honey and you have spring allergies, it helps. Same thing with the fall allergies. And there's something called apitherapy, which is basically using bee sting therapy to help relieve joint pain. And so one of the people who I observed doing this was actually in Rhode Island, Dr. Ziegler, who at 92, he was still using bee sting therapy, and he had actually studied with the Vermont beekeeper, Charles Mraz, who brought this to light as an effective form of helping with muscle and joint pain. And so I welcome this very small audience in the future. Come and visit our hives. We always love to talk about bees and beekeeping. We love to share our information, and anyone is welcome anytime. We like to help the general public to understand how important it is to not just save the bees, but to promote bees and beekeeping, and to make a friend with a beekeeper. You'll get a lot of sweet rewards. So that's our address, 710 Dick Brown Road. You're most welcome to come. And I thank you for your kind attention.